Modena è sempre stata un po' considerata come la culla della fotografia italiana, da una parte per i tanti importanti autori che ha generato. Parliamo insomma di gente come Luigi Ghirri, come Franco Fontana, Franco Vaccari, anche Leo Barbieri, ma credo che soprattutto, al di là di quello che è la qualità di questi autori, è proprio la sete, il bisogno di confrontarsi con l'immagine che il pubblico di questa città ha saputo affinare. Quindi se un premio di questa importanza doveva nascere in Italia, di sicuro doveva essere Modena a proporlo. Abbiamo cercato di inventare e di organizzare un premio che fosse comunque differente da quanto già esiste a livello internazionale e di conseguenza abbiamo coinvolto 12 selezionatori internazionali, ognuno di loro ha proposto 2 nomi, riferendosi al tema che è stato indicato, tema che nel caso della prima edizione è l'identità e che è parso sia a noi sia a Sky Arte come un tema giusto e attuale da cui partire questo premio.
We all have a definition of identity and know how it could translate for an image, but it makes it easier to let's say, to separate those we think are not totally into the subject from those who are dealing more closely with the subject.
We saw very, very important works and very, very strong photographers that, of course, maybe deserve to have a big prize, a photography prize like this, but they were not really fitted into the category of identity. So the theme is really, really important to make sure that you can filter what can be suitable for it.
Some people would think that we're talking about nationality, some people would think that we're talking about race, some people think a lot of things. So it's very difficult for people to understand exactly how complex is the notion of identity.
We have been discussing about identity, not only about, in context of photography. We find that identity issue is strongly related with memory. Memory of individual and memory of the group and the collective.
I think in this moment we have a more diverse, more open situation in terms of identity. So it can be a very personal research. Of course, political, it's always when we see the current events in the world, in Europe and abroad.
So to address the issue of identity is to try to give a message that would be as universal as possible and not to be specific, to allow people to think with a distance and not in terms, again, of geography or territories, but in human terms.
Good morning to everybody. Welcome to Modena. Thank you for coming and joining us in occasion of the first edition of the International Award Photography. And I'd just like to introduce each of you: Simon Gianni, Christine Frisinghelli, Tiago Nogueira, Shinji Komoto. First of all, we will have a look to all the candidates and the nomination. Then we could arrive at 10-12 candidates. And then I'm at the final short list of 5. Un conto è se immaginiamo che un autore nel corso della sua carriera abbia per 1 o 2 volte, per 1 anno o per 5, investigato e come questo tema. Un conto è se il tema dell'identità, magari declinato in altre categorie, sia stato comunque in un certo senso il filo conduttore della sua intera ricerca. In base a questa considerazione è stata fatta una prima importante selezione che da 24 ha ristretto il numero dei candidati alla vittoria finale.
Well, we did a voting process, which is very democratic in a way to arrive at a short list. So it was not so difficult to get there, although we had planned to have 5 finalists and then we arrived at 6.
La short list finale era composta da 6 nomi, da 6 artisti.
She's really dedicated her life to document and photograph indigenous people in the north part of Brazil. So she was very responsible for giving them visibility and also for asserting their importance in Brazilian culture. So.
Claudia Andújar, a mio avviso, è un eccellente candidato alla vittoria finale, intanto perché è assolutamente centrata sul tema dell'identità, in questo caso la difesa di un'identità, che non è solo un'identità sociale, ma in questo caso è, se vogliamo, addirittura una lotta per la sopravvivenza, quelli degli indios Yanomami, dell'Amazzonia brasiliana.
It was not looking at someone's life, but being involved in the life, but also the struggles of these people.
And she merged so much into her subject that there's a moment where one could confuse her with her subject.
È vero, come alcuni dei giurati hanno rilevato, che data anche la sua più che venerabile età, da diversi anni lei non fotografa più, non è più in attività e lavora sull'archivio. È altrettanto vero che questa sua ostinazione, questa sua capacità anche a più di 80 anni di insistere attraverso le proprie immagini nella difesa ostentata di quello che è un argomento, un tema molto importante, è per certi versi una ragione in più.
I was very happy to find quite a wide variety of the artists and photographers. Not only the pure photographer, but also the good artists who operate the photo media as expression. He is a non-Western photographer operating the constructed photo early 80s. And his costume play is a kind of a practice to find the alternative ego or alternative identity.
The work of Japanese photographer Yasumi Morimura is also very, very intriguing work. He performs and he reenacts important photographs and scenes from movies and famous historical figures. And he's been doing this in a Cinder Sherman-like self-portraiture of and questioning of the representation that I feel it's really, really important and has also a strong relation with the identity theme of this edition.
Working with their own body, with their own identity, in starting in playing, taking on the roles of other individuals, of other emblematic figures in history.
It's quite interesting for me to see how a Japanese photographer, because he is Japanese, is impersonating characters who are mostly Westerners.
I think it was also interesting because the colleagues in the jury have been coming from different directions, different countries, cultures, even different continents. So I was curious to see how this would work out.
Muhori è una giovane artista ed è una bandiera di quello che è la difesa e l'affermazione dei diritti della comunità omosessuale, non solo in Sudafrica.
She deals with the visibility of the lesbian community and the black community of South Africa also, which I think fits perfectly with the identity issue that is the theme for this edition of the prize.
Can show me the way to my heart.
And it's a very beautiful, very sober, very clear way of portraiture, very meaningful, full of respect. So the way she is photographing her friends, lovers.
What is interesting in this work, in this particular work, is that it reminds us that no matter how many fights we've been winning, how many victories we've been having, there's always a new fight to be fought. So the apartheid is over. There's a bunch of forms of apartheid all over the world and in South Africa that needs to be defeated, and this is her combat, this is her fight.
I think the main difficulty is that you have, in a jury like this, with such an important prize, you have so many interesting candidates, so many interesting nominated photographers, that is really hard to make them compete with each other and try to arrive at one single result. Jim is a very important photographer, and he has produced a very influential body of work, It's Rich and Poor, which is also very important to understand the difference of social classes, but also the relation between a photographer and the sitter. He was managed to break the barrier between the camera and the person that's sitting in front of the camera.
Jim Goldberg is a very interesting approach to the theme of identity. The way he has been able to hand over the authorship from his own being a photographer to the people he is inviting to present themselves, both in pictures and in writing. So the way he looks at the American society, at the social diversity.
So what Jim did was that after having shot the images, he came back to his subject, quote unquote, and asked them to comment themselves on the images, so to give their own point of view about the way they were shot.
I understand the memory, individual memory, is over 50% shift to the collective memory. Society, belong to the society. So which means we cannot find any solution to find a pure identity of individual.
La è stata un punto di riferimento, e lo è ancora oggi, per moltissime generazioni, in questa ostinata appunto, in ricerca sull'identità attraverso tante generazioni e tanti modelli anche di umanità.
And identity, the idea of identity and photography immediately leads you towards how does a photograph of a person define or represent identity.
Our use of color and the way she positioned her subject, the way she framed her images is just a lesson for anyone who wants to be a photographer. A prize is not just a prize, it's always a signal that you're sending to people. It's always a kind of a label that you're establishing, especially when you're judging it for the first time, which means that whatever the result will be like responsible of the history of this prize. Was born and was a grown-up boy during the apartheid regime, so he had to take a stance. But over the years, what Santu has been doing, I've never been to contradict the other story. I've never tried to be designing a guilty one. What he was busy with was to tell his own story and to reconstruct his own story. This is what is important, especially in a country with such a complex story.
Santo Mofokeng è un autore che ha sempre fatto della riservatezza, dell'intimità e della necessità di essere libero da certi schemi e da certe situazioni, non tanto una bandiera quanto proprio uno stile di vita.
Santu never wanted to be in a gallery. Santu never wanted to exhibit here or there. He was always been very clear about what he wants and where he wants to be.
E questa libertà gli ha permesso di produrre delle immagini clamorose. Questo straordinario libro, raccolta di immagini di famiglie benestanti, di quella che era un tempo la bourgeoisie sudafricana, scomparsa fisicamente, oltre che letteralmente, cancellata dall'apartheid e volendolo intitolare Look at Me. Noi esistiamo e continueremo a esistere per quanto voi ci abbiate cancellato.